The Victorian house looked exactly as I remembered it. Tall, proud, with its deep green trim and wraparound porch where Grandma used to serve her famous mint tea. Except now, there was a sign hanging over the front door, Thompson Family Enterprises. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was supposed to be my homecoming after 5 years away, not whatever corporate takeover my family had orchestrated. When Grandma passed 6 months ago, her will had been clear. The house went to me, her only granddaughter. I'd been traveling abroad, building my photography career, when I got the news, and my parents had offered to take care of everything until I returned. I should have known better. Pulling into the circular driveway, I noticed the gardens had been paved over for additional parking. The porch furniture, Grandma's beloved wicker sets, had been replaced with modern metal benches. Even the stained glass panels in the front door had been swapped for plain frosted glass, bearing the company logo. Before I could reach for my keys, the door swung open. "Julia, you're finally here." My mother stood in the doorway wearing a crisp business suit, a far cry from the casual mom I remembered. "What's going on?" I gestured at the sign. "What happened to Grandma's house?" "Your father's brilliant idea," she beamed, pulling me inside. We needed a proper headquarters for the family business, and this place was just sitting empty. "Come see what we've done." The foyer, once warm and welcoming with its antique runner and family photos, now looked like a corporate lobby. A sleek reception desk stood where Grandma's hall tree had been. The hardwood floors were covered in commercial-grade carpeting. "Mom, this house wasn't sitting empty. It's mine. Grandma left it to me." "Of course, sweetie. That's why it's perfect. You're part of the family business now, too." I followed her through the house in a daze. The living room had become a conference space. The dining room was now cubicles. Upstairs, bedrooms had been converted into offices, including my old room. "And here's the best part," Mom said, throwing open the double doors to Grandma's former bedroom. The master suite with its bay windows overlooking the garden. Or what used to be the garden. "Your father's executive office." Dad looked up from behind an enormous desk, Grandma's antique writing desk, I realized with a jolt, refinished in glossy black. "There's my girl, ready to join Thompson Family Enterprises." "What enterprise?" I managed to ask. "Since when do we have a family business?" "Since your mother and I realized we needed to diversify our investments," he said, standing to hug me. "Real estate mostly. Some property management. A little bit of everything. Your brother's handling the financial side and your sister's doing marketing." "With my house," I said flatly. "Our corporate headquarters," he corrected. "Much more professional than working from home. We've already doubled our client base since moving in. And wait until you see your office." Mom grabbed my arm, dragging me down the hall to what had been Grandma's sewing room. "We thought you could handle our social media presence. Your photography skills would be perfect for property listings." The room was now painted stark white, with motivational posters on the walls and a computer setup that looked like it belonged in a tech startup. Nothing remained of the cozy space where I'd learned to sew at my grandmother's knee. "I have a career," I said. "A life in London." "Oh, that was fine for a while." Mom waved dismissively. "But it's time to come home, be part of something bigger. Family is everything, Julia." "Family?" I pulled away from her. "Family doesn't commandeer someone's inheritance." "Now, Julia," Dad appeared in the doorway. "Don't be dramatic. We've invested considerable resources into transforming this old house into a modern business center. Your grandmother would have wanted the property used, not just sitting here gathering dust." "Gathering dust?" I was coming back. "I told you I just needed to finish my contract." "And now you have," he smiled. "Perfect timing. We've already added you to the company paperwork as creative director." My head spun. This was why they'd been so insistent on handling the estate paperwork. Why they discouraged me from hiring my own lawyer. Why they pressed me to extend my stay abroad until everything was settled. "Where's all Grandma's stuff?" I asked suddenly. "Her furniture, her collections?" Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "We had to clear space for the office equipment," Mom said carefully. "Most of it went to storage. Some of the more outdated pieces were donated." Donated? That outdated furniture included antiques worth thousands. Family heirlooms. "Now, Julia," Dad used his warning tone, the one that used to make me back down instantly. "What's done is done. The important thing is moving forward. Building something together." I walked to the window, new double-pane glass replacing Grandma's beloved diamond panes, and looked out at the concrete parking lot. Somewhere under all that pavement were her prize-winning roses. "I need to see the will," I said quietly. "Oh, honey, all the estate matters have been handled," Mom said quickly. "There's no need to dig up paperwork now." Actually, there is. I turned to face them because I distinctly remember Grandma's lawyer reading that this house was left to me. Not the family, not a business. Me. Well, yes, technically, Dad admitted. But as your parents, we had to make decisions in your best interest while you were away. And this benefits everyone. Think of the opportunities. The only opportunity I'm thinking about is getting my house back. Mom's face hardened. "Don't be selfish, Julia. This is about family." "No," I said. "This is about control. And theft." "Theft?" Dad's voice rose. "We're your parents. And this is my house. My inheritance, not your corporate headquarters." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd saved just in case. Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Harrison. "What are you doing?" Mom reached for the phone, but I stepped back. "Getting answers," I said as it rang, "and then getting my house back." Dad's face turned red. "Now see here." "Mr. Harrison?" I said as the call connected. "This is Julia Thompson. We need to talk about my grandmother's will, and about some unauthorized changes to her property." The silence from my parents was deafening. In that moment, looking at their shocked faces, I realized just how much they'd underestimated me. They thought I was still the compliant daughter who left 5 years ago. They were wrong. "I'll be right over," Mr. Harrison said. "Don't let anyone remove anything from the premises." I ended the call and faced my parents. "I suggest you start packing up your office supplies. Because this ends now." Mr. Harrison arrived within the hour, his weathered briefcase containing the one thing my parents had tried to keep from me, the truth. As we sat in what used to be Grandma's parlor, now converted into a sterile conference room, he spread out the documents. "The will is unambiguous," he stated, adjusting his glasses. "Catherine Thompson left the house and all its contents solely to Julia Thompson, with explicit instructions that it not be used for commercial purposes." My mother's perfectly manicured nails drummed on the conference table. We were acting as Julia's representatives during her absence. Without power of attorney, Mr. Harrison countered. "And the business registration documents filed with the state list this property as belonging to Thompson Family Enterprises, not Julia." "We transferred the deed for tax purposes," Dad interjected. "Perfectly legal." Actually, Mr. Harrison pulled out another document. It wasn't. The will included a specific clause preventing the property from being transferred or used commercially for 10 years after Catherine's death. Any such transfer is void. I watched my parents' faces as their carefully constructed plan began to crumble. My brother Mark chose that moment to walk in, briefcase in hand. "What's going on?" "We have clients coming in." He stopped short when he saw Mr. Harrison. "Oh, did you know about the will's restrictions?" I asked him directly. Mark had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I may have seen something in the paperwork. And you went along with this anyway?" "It was a good business opportunity," he defended. "The location is perfect, and the renovations have already increased the property value." "The renovations I never approved," I cut in. "The changes to a house that legally belongs to me." My sister, Sarah, appeared in the doorway next, her marketing materials clutched to her chest. "Why is everyone just sitting around? The Johnson meeting is in 20 minutes. "There won't be any meetings," I said firmly. "Not here. Not anymore." The next hour was chaos. Mr. Harrison methodically outlined every legal violation my family had committed. The unauthorized property transfer, the commercial zoning changes filed without the legal owner's consent, the business registration using an address they had no right to claim. "You have 72 hours to vacate," he concluded. "After that, we'll proceed with legal action." "You'd sue your own family?" Mom's voice trembled. "You stole my inheritance," I replied quietly. "You turned Grandma's home into an office building without my permission. What did you think would happen when I came back?" "We thought you'd understand." Sarah burst out. "You were off playing photographer while we were building something real." "Playing?" I stood up. "I have gallery showings in 3 countries. My work has been published internationally. Just because it's not your idea of success doesn't make it any less real." Enough, Dad's authoritative voice boomed. "There must be a compromise here. Julia, Be reasonable. We've invested thousands in renovations. Without my consent, I reminded him. And after removing or destroying Grandma's belongings, where are they? The silence was telling. Storage unit on Baker Street, Mark finally admitted. What's left of them anyway? My heart clenched. What's left? Some furniture was too old-fashioned for a modern office, Mom explained defensively. And those awful doilies and knickknacks had to go. I closed my eyes, remembering Grandma's precious collections, her handmade lace, the delicate figurines she gathered over decades. All gone because they didn't fit my family's corporate aesthetic. 72 hours, I repeated. Get out. Julia. Dad started. No, I opened my eyes. You've spent my entire life trying to mold me into your version of success. When I chose my own path, you called it a phase. When I moved abroad, you called it running away. Now you try to force me back by stealing my inheritance. It ends here. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. There's also the matter of compensation for unauthorized use of the property, plus damages for any destroyed items. You can't be serious, Sarah scoffed. Very serious, he replied. I've already drafted the paperwork. The next 3 days were tense. I stayed in a hotel, refusing to sleep in the corporate shell they'd made of Grandma's house. I hired a professional documentation service to photograph every change they'd made, every item they'd removed or altered. The storage unit revealed the scope of their destruction. Priceless antiques shoved carelessly aside, some damaged beyond repair. Family photos stripped from their frames because the frames clash with the decor. Grandma's journals and recipes tossed in boxes labeled miscellaneous junk. By day 3, moving trucks arrived to remove the office furniture. I watched from the porch, now stripped of my mother's modern benches, as they loaded up desks, computers, and filing cabinets. This isn't over, Mom declared as she carried out her last box. We're family, you can't just cut us off. Watch me, I replied. That night, alone in the empty house, I began to understand the magnitude of the task ahead. Restoring Grandma's home wouldn't be easy, but as I sat on the floor of what used to be her bedroom, I found one small treasure they'd missed. A loose floorboard containing a letter addressed to me. Dearest Julia, it began in Grandma's familiar handwriting. If you're reading this, they've tried to take control. They never understood that success isn't about power or money. It's about staying true to yourself. Don't let them change you, my darling. This house is yours because you're the only one who truly understands its heart. I held the letter to my chest and finally let myself cry. For Grandma. For the home that had been violated. For the family I'd lost, or maybe never really had. But as the sun rose the next morning, I began to plan. The house would be restored, not to a corporate headquarters or even exactly as it was, but to something new. Something that honored both Grandma's memory and my own dreams. First step, calling a contractor who specialized in historical renovations. The renovation began as an act of restoration but evolved into something more. With each passing week, the house transformed, not back to what it was, but into a harmonious blend of past and present. I converted the formal parlor into a photography gallery, displaying both my work and Grandma's cherished photographs. Her kitchen, once stripped to corporate sterility, now housed modern appliances alongside her salvaged copper pots, hanging proudly from the restored ceiling rack. The cease and desist letters from my family's lawyers arrived predictably. They claimed business losses and demanded compensation for the renovations they'd done. Mr. Harrison handled them all with quiet efficiency, countering with our own claims for damages. They're bleeding money, he informed me over coffee in the partially restored dining room. The business loans they took out assumed this property would be a permanent headquarters. Without it, I should have felt satisfied, but mostly I felt tired. Have they even asked how much of Grandma's things they destroyed? They don't see it that way, he said gently. To them, it was just old furniture. But it wasn't just furniture. Each piece held memories. The armchair where Grandma taught me to knit. The bureau with secret compartments full of treasures. The dining table that had hosted 50 years of family dinners. Some pieces I managed to restore. Others were lost forever. Mark was the first to break ranks. He showed up one rainy morning, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes instead of his usual suit. I found these in my office, he said, holding out a box. Inside were Grandma's recipe cards, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. I remembered how you used to bake with her. I took the box, emotions warring inside me. Why did you go along with it, Mark? He sighed, looking around at the half-finished restoration. It was easier than fighting them. It's always been easier than fighting them. You were the only one brave enough to leave. And now? Now their house of cards is collapsing. The business loans are being called in. Clients are backing out after hearing about the property dispute. Sarah's marketing contracts are falling through. That's not my problem. No, he agreed quietly. It's not. But I thought you should know. Dad's been hospitalized. Stress. I absorbed this without comment. Mark shifted uncomfortably. The house, it looks good. More like it used to, but different too. That's the point, I said. Honoring the past doesn't mean being trapped in it. After he left, I sat in Grandma's restored garden, where new roses were finally taking root. The concrete parking lot was gone, replaced by beds of her favorite flowers. The old garden bench, one of the few pieces my family hadn't destroyed, stood under the maple tree. Sarah came next, not to apologize but to accuse. Are you happy now? Everything's falling apart. You did that yourselves, I replied calmly, when you decided to steal what wasn't yours. We were trying to build something. A legacy. No, I said, looking at her directly. You were trying to control something, like always. She left in tears, but I noticed she paused to look at the gallery wall, where photos of happier times hung alongside my professional work. Family moments captured in silver frames, showing what we used to be before ambition and control became everything. Mom and Dad held out the longest, sending increasingly desperate messages through their lawyers. The business was failing. They needed the address for their licensing. They'd make me a full partner. I sent back only one response. The house is not for sale or lease. All future communication must go through legal channels. 6 months after I'd returned home, the restoration was nearly complete. The Victorian details had been preserved or restored, but now they coexisted with modern elements that made the space uniquely mine. The upper floor became my photography studio, flooded with natural light from restored windows. The library housed both Grandma's books and my digital equipment. That's when the last letter arrived, not from a lawyer, but from Mom, handwritten on her personal stationery. Dear Julia, your father is home from the hospital. The business is gone. We lost everything trying to hold onto something that was never ours to begin with. I look at our empty house now and finally understand what we did wrong. We didn't just take your inheritance, we tried to take your choices, like we always have. Grandma would be proud of what you've done with the house. She always said you were the only one who truly saw its beauty. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you might let me see the roses bloom again. Love, Mom. I sat in Grandma's restored garden, reading the letter as dusk fell. The roses were indeed blooming, their fragrance filling the air just as it had in my childhood. On the porch, my camera equipment waited for tomorrow's client. My studio was becoming known for blending traditional portraiture with modern techniques. The house had found its new purpose, neither trapped in the past nor stripped of its history. Like me, it had emerged from my family's attempted takeover stronger and more authentic. I took out my phone and after a long moment, typed, "The roses bloom every evening at 6. Tea is served on the porch, Grandma's recipe." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But perhaps, like the house, our family could find a way to honor its past while building something new. A year after the restoration, I stood in Grandma's, now my kitchen, preparing her famous mint tea. The afternoon light streamed through the restored stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the antique tiles we'd salvaged. The porch had become a weekly gathering spot, not for corporate meetings, but for something more meaningful. Mom came first, tentatively, then regularly. We didn't talk about the business or the past, just shared tea and watched the roses grow. Sometimes she'd bring old photos she'd found, quietly returning pieces of our history. Mark stopped by with his kids, who now loved exploring the house's nooks and crannies just as I once had. Sarah remained distant, but I'd seen her parked across the street sometimes, looking at the restored facade with what I hoped was understanding. Dad took the longest to come around. His health improved, but his pride remained wounded, until the day he arrived unannounced, carrying a familiar object wrapped in cloth. "Found this in our attic," he said gruffly, unveiling Grandma's antique mantel clock. "Thought it should come home." The house had become more than just a residence or studio. It was a bridge between past and present, hosting photography workshops in rooms where family portraits still hung, combining digital innovation with historical charm. Local preservation societies praised the restoration, featuring it in heritage tours. My photography business thrived, clients drawn to the unique atmosphere. But more importantly, the house had taught us all something about legacy. One evening, as Mom and I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the roses gold, she finally asked, "Would you ever consider making this a family home again?" I sipped my tea, considering. "It already is," I replied, "just not the way you originally planned." She nodded, understanding at last. The house wasn't about business empires or forced togetherness. It was about choosing to preserve what mattered while allowing space for growth. In Grandma's restored study, I found her final diary entry. A house is not just walls and windows, but the stories it holds and the futures it dreams. Julia will understand this better than anyone. She was right. I had understood. The house had never needed to be a corporate headquarters to have value. Its worth lay in the memories it preserved and the new ones it welcomed. Standing in the garden, watching new roses bloom alongside Grandma's heritage plants, I realized we'd all grown through this journey. My family had learned about respect and boundaries. I learned that preserving the past didn't mean sacrificing the future. The house stood proud, neither stuck in time nor stripped of history. Like the roses in the garden, it had weathered storms and emerged stronger. And maybe, just maybe, so had we. I added a final photograph to the gallery wall. Our first civil family gathering on the restored porch, teacups in hand, roses in bloom behind us. Not perfect, but real. Not what we were, but what we could become. Grandma would have liked that.